I'm Agent Morris with the NSA.
We have identified some very, very interesting anomalous type of aircraft.
Traffic is quite luminous and is exhibiting some non-ballistic motion. Over.
Move very rapidly at any speed or rather any direction it wanted to go. Fly could change and go to the right or the left or go crossways without hesitating a bit.
What do you think it was?
Well, if they call it a flying saucer, that's what it is.
EWA 517, do you want to report a UFO? Over. Negative. We don't want to report.
Look, it wasn't my worst Wednesday night.
Welcome aboard, everybody. This is Smiles Lewis.
Hey, Mark Jackson, everybody. Hope you're doing well.
Doing the best we can. How are you, Mark?
Hey, I can't complain, to be honest with you. I feel like everybody's starting to hit their stride, my neighborhood, my cohort, everybody. So the trend is upward and out of this last year. How about you, man?
That's what I keep telling myself.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Welcome, everybody. This is Anomaly-NOW, live from Austin, Texas. This is the weekly news roundup show for the nonprofit 501c3 Scientific Anomaly Institute, aka the Anomaly Archives, located here in Austin, Texas. And we're glad to be here, and thank you for joining us. We have, of course, a ton of news that we can always talk about. You can go to our website, anomalyarchives.org, and there on the sidebar, you can see the link to our Flipboard account where we flip all these news links into for your reading pleasure at your appointed reading time, whenever you have time for such interesting and diverse subject matters as that covered by the Anomaly Archives. A couple of weeks ago, I was honored to be the guest and had a great time on the Austin ACA's Atheist Community of Austin's Truth Wanted show with their host, Objectively Dan. And I'm happy to say it was a pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much, Dan and crew. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to that audience. And had a great time. It's a call-in show, and so we took some calls, most of which focused on people's interest in the probability of extraterrestrial life. Thoughts ranging from everybody says, it's inevitable that there's extraterrestrial life since it's such a huge universe, but also saying, well, we just don't know, especially if you don't accept the kind of evidence or stories that inform most of the bulk of the Anomaly Archives in terms of people's claims of strange encounters with seeming otherworldly intelligences. So, but you folks can go to, I'll post the link to the archive of that Truth Wanted show, and I hope you'll give it a try. It's a great show, and looking forward to maybe going back on there sometime in the future. I will say it was very friendly, and there was definitely some warm reception from some of the audience members. But I, not unsurprisingly, saw that there were quite a few people who were like, "Oh my God, this guy is nuts! Why isn't the host pushing back on his insanity?" kind of thing. And that was with me, saying I don't necessarily believe all this stuff. I just find it fascinating, and I'm, as like a librarian, not trained or accredited, but as someone who runs an archive focused on these subjects, and somebody who travels the multiverse that these stories imply about reality, I'm just reporting these things. So that struck me as kind of funny. But anyway.
Well, you probably handled it very well. I'm going to pick back up on that, Miles. I'm glad you did it. And tell the folks where you can find a link. Where have you put the link? If they go to our website or the archives website, how do we find you for that interview?
Yeah, so it's in the past post links at the Anomaly Archives, and it'll be in the link after the show for this
Great.
show.
Perfect.
But basically, if you just search for Truth Wanted on YouTube, you'll find it. And they do it every Friday night from 7 to 8:30, and it's a live call-in show. So check it out.
Perfect.
Meanwhile, in the Gulf of Mexico, here in the grand old state of Texas, we have this large body of water down south of us. And I was really excited to see my cryptozoological outdoorsman friend Chester Moore write that in 2005, I wrote a controversial but award-winning article called Jaws in the Gulf for Tide magazine. Some said great whites in the Gulf were a myth. A few years later, the groundbreaking satellite tagging of Oshurst proved great whites are in the Gulf, not just historically as shown in the Tide piece, but in real time. And last year I wrote, this is again Chester Moore writing Jaws in the Texas waters for Texas Fish and Game, stating we would see tagged whites off of Texas soon. That article won first in magazine feature category for Texas Outdoor Writers Association Excellence in Craft competition a few weeks ago in Port Arthur. Congratulations to my good friend Chester Moore. And he goes on writing about this, but you can read his article that we've got there up on the screen over at fishgame.com. That's great white verified off Texas coast. And sure enough, one of these tagged great whites, I believe, I forget if it was tagged exactly where, but not in one of the Gulf states, I don't think, but it's swum around. And every time it breaches the surface of the water, it sends a ping, a signal to the satellite trackers. And sure enough, there they are. Now, in the article, he goes on to relate the fact that there have actually been quite a few historic confirmations of great whites in the Gulf of Mexico for a long, long time. But then, due to those those bad kind of fishing practices with certain types of nets, it was killing off the young great whites, and they weren't able to reproduce, and so they were largely killed off in the Gulf. So just kind of interesting. I was really excited to see my good friend Chester Moore have his previous work confirmed with regard to this particular issue. Now, Chester, came to my attention because of his being a Bigfooter, but he is just an all around outdoorsman, and man, he's an outdoor journalist and writer, and also now a philanthropist of sorts with this nonprofit that he is involved with, trying to educate children about the great outdoors. So kudos to our good friend Chester Moore. And in other Gulf of Mexico news, now none of this is particularly anomalous, but again, out of place animals is kind of a subcategory of cryptozoology. And this one I think is actually from February, if memory serves. Fishing group spots large orca pod off Galveston coast, and you can actually see video footage of it at that link. And again, nothing too, anomalous, but it really pleases me, honestly, when I hear about these kinds of, large fish and mammals, these two different types of seafaring creatures in our own Gulf just south of us. So,
well, what's really great is that the sightings of these fish coincide with larger climatic sort of trends, and then also just sort of like one-off events with weather, because of course seafaring life follows basically underwater highways, to keep it really simple. And sometimes these pathways get shifted closer to the continents, or they go further out into the deep ocean, etc. So it would be interesting to see the correlation, if somebody were to even think about, or looking into this, the correlation between weather events, climate events, etc., and these sightings, etc. Anyway, so there is a correlation between sea life behavior and larger planetary events and cyclical nature there within. So anyway.
Yeah, and with all the ever-growing discussion about climate change and how our planet's wind patterns and those ocean patterns, those highways,
absolutely,
highways in the sky and highways under the seas.
Yeah,
that's going to change, and so is thus the migratory patterns of these different creatures. So, Meanwhile, across the pond, there is this news about Stonehenge. And, I'm not a huge expert on this. It's not, I've always had a fascination with ancient sacred circles and standing stone circles and whatnot. And of course, the Stonehenge being the quintessential or most commonly known one to the world's populace. Apparently, over 900 years ago, there was this Geoffrey of Monmouth, this historian who some say was kind of one of the biggest promoters of the idea of Merlin and King Arthur's court, but he apparently also told this tale of wizard Merlin's leading men to Ireland to capture a magical stone circle called the Giant's Dance and rebuilding it in England as a memorial to the dead. Well, now there's new scientific evidence based on a close examination of this area. And I'm going to probably get the names of these areas wrong, but it's near Wanwan, Waunmawn, Wanwan, and there's they had long ago proven that the blue stones of Stonehenge had been quarried this great distance. What is it, like about 140, 150 miles or more across the landscape, and had been moved to the Stonehenge. Well, now that it appears that there may actually be some kind of scientific backing, some evidence for them having been set up, built in Wales, and venerated, quote unquote, for hundreds of years before being dismantled and dragged to Wiltshire, where they then were reassembled, and thus the modern Stonehenge. Now, the where and the why and all the details, but still remain lost to the mists of history. But it's pretty interesting that this seems to actually kind of mirror, again, this Geoffrey of Monmouth's idea that incorporated, of course, the stories of Merlin and King Arthur, which are considered to be mythic and whatnot. But just another one of those interesting details about how, if somebody stays on this, and I think the data for this research goes back several years. In 2015, Parker Pearson's team discovered a series of recesses in the rocky outcrops of Carn Godog and Craig Rossiflin, I just butchered that name, with similar stones that the prehistoric builders extracted but left behind. Carbonized hazelnut shells, the charred remains of a Neolithic snack from the quarry workers' campfires, were radiocarbon dated to 3,300 BC, meaning the blue stones had been quarried almost 4 centuries before Stonehenge was constructed. And there's a nice map available at that website that is, of course, theguardian.com. So if you're into standing stones, go check it out.
The science behind testing the provenance for rock, petrology is what it's called, is it's very understood because of the way there's a unique fingerprint for all of the extrusions of that type of rock. So you can actually take a cross section, and this is for all the geology nerds out there. You can take a cross section of the rock and look under a microscope, and you can correlate the provenance of a rock back to, if you, of course, have a sample from where you're trying to test that it potentially came from. It's very easy under the microscope to keep this simple, to match up the fingerprint of these two different places. And I'm sure that's what's in play here, both in terms of time and then also provenance, again, or location. So anyway, there's actual, it's really good science. It's not guessing at all. It's like literally fingerprints. So FYI, the data is good.
And geology nerds, as soon as you said that, I was like you.
There's got to be at least one out there, maybe one.
Meanwhile, in UAP UFO news, there's been so much discussion in the media now about this upcoming UAP, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force that was formed by the Pentagon, and this upcoming report. It's so bizarre for me in so many ways, having been a UFO nerd for so long, and seeing this sea change in reportage on this subject. Now, before we go into that, though, I did just, and I know I didn't include this in the links, but I just finally finished seeing and watching I think it's the 2018 documentary Hunt for the Skinwalker by director Jeremy Kenyon Lockyer Corbell. And I'd seen at least 2 of his other films, Patient 17 and the Bob Lazar Area 51 and Flying Saucers documentaries. And he definitely has a certain kind of style that I both like and dislike in terms of his filmmaking approach, his documentarian approach. But of course, with the Skinwalker Ranch stuff, I mean, I am fascinated by this. It is just such a strange case and does have all this panoply of strange phenomena, poltergeist, paranormal, haunting type phenomena, the cattle mutilation phenomena, Bigfoot, weird, mysterious creatures, seeming strange physics, and classic physical craft type UFO sightings, all in the Uinta Basin. I don't know. Have you seen this, Mark?
I saw a little bit of it. I didn't watch it through. I will say that I think what I took away from what I watched was he was sort of demonstrating the poltergeist phenomena, that when you project your interest, or what's a better way to say that, whatever you're looking for, there's this weird way that consciousness has a sneaky way of projecting it into your reality for you. And I think that explains this swatch of everything you just said. Anyway, and they kind of captured that. So if you're familiar with the poltergeist phenomena and the way that, you can influence your own reality, that's what I took away from it. Is this is like this case study in how the range is so broad for that sort of phenomena.
Well said. And in fact, that is very much part of the approach. Whether it's the interview footage with billionaire Bob Bigelow, or the journalist George Knapp, whose actual footage and previous attempt at a documentary about his experience investigating that case, and through his friendship with Bob Bigelow and many of the players behind all of this new ever unfolding UAP, UFO revelations and news. It is that the phenomena seems to, when you look into the abyss, it looks back, but that it actually seemed to, as they suggest, precognitively or respond to your intent or your interest, as I think you were trying to say, that it anticipates your response, and no 2 events were ever the same. Anyway, suffice to say, again, good things, bad things about the filmmaking style, but I was very happy to learn a little bit more about this, and it was particularly intriguing watching George Knapp carefully navigate around the fact that he's known a lot more about this than he could ever publicly say for all these years. And even once finally with the December 2017 New York Times and other news outlet revelations about the Pentagon's ATIP program, and then later on the OSAP program, and Bigelow's subcontracting through his BAAS program, it really kind of helps fill in some of the gaps a little. But also as I've been reading Jacques Vallée's Forbidden Science Journals Volume 4, where, it's the 1990s, and from his journals and his reflection day to day about his involvement with NIDS, with Bigelow, with the Skinwalker Ranch, and hearing about the stories that were coming out of it, and seeing some of the evidence, and being, very intrigued, but also frustrated, as everybody else was, about the inability to get that kind of definitive evidence. And anyway, it all feeds right into where we are with this establishment of an unidentified aerial phenomena task force. And back in August of last year, the result of all of this news, and some would say pressure on the military-industrial complex to come clean about this, resulted in the formation in the Navy of this UAP task force to better collect and catalog these potential threats. Again, it's all couched in terms of threats, and seems more obviously and understandably focused on the issue of these things could be a danger to our populace, but also our military, since so many of the encounters that are being focused upon are involving Navy ships and pilots and our restricted airspace when we've been doing exercises and whatnot. So when last year the one of the previous COVID relief bills was passed, and tacked onto it was this 180-day countdown for the revelation to the public, or to the Congress, about this the nature of what the military has gathered in terms of these sightings. It's obviously firing people's imagination, and rightfully so. And there's just Rand, Ratcliffe, and Reed, and Rubio in the news. All these different individuals are in the news. Here we have Rubio being queried at an airport, where the TMZ reporter is not asking him about anything that's more traditionally political and normal, but in fact is like, so tell us what you think about this UAP task force and whatnot. And of course, he was quoted as saying there are a lot more sightings that have been made public. He's of course the former director of national intelligence, and that quote is from March 19th of this year, so just a couple of weeks ago, or a week ago. Meanwhile, back in, I guess, August, right around the forming of this task force, he was quoted as saying, Senator Marco Rubio, Republican of Florida, "We have things flying over our military bases and places where we are conducting military exercises, and we don't know what it is, and it isn't ours. So that's a legitimate question to ask." Which is like, well, duh. Again, so much of this, and that's what Lou Elizondo had complained about, saying, these reports are happening. They're going up the chain a little, but then they just stop. They never rise to the level where anybody actually does anything. So again, I'm very reserved and skeptical as to whether this is actually, quote unquote, part of a big disclosure by the government, or if it's just some other stratagem to get more military funding or whatnot. But
yeah, I'm skeptical too, Miles. You have the right to be skeptical. I mean, first of all, nothing classified is going to come out of this. If anything is going to come out of it, it's going to be a note to the public, or a sort of reorganization within the military, that they put this under one roof. And I think that was what ATIP's whole original intent was, is that, there's more organization around the topic. What I find interesting, though, Miles, is that this is the same thing that happened with the missile silos, the nuclear missile silos. And these, what we're looking at now are these incidents over aircraft carriers, and destroyers and all like that, with these Navy ships. But the same thing was happening when Blue Book got started with over the missile silos. So here we have high technology over military sites, whatever that site may be. But it's the exact same thing. What I find when I think about this a little bit, it's like, okay, missile silos are very high tech for its time, obviously. But then now the Navy ships carry the same nuclear arsenal in some cases, but even more high tech, lasers, direct energy weapons, all this sort of stuff. So the technology shifts from out of the ground, and now we've put high technology on the seas, and we're seeing the same phenomena as we did, 50 years ago, over when we had land-based technology that was cutting edge. So it's almost like the phenomena follows this progression, with the technology. And that's what I'm kind of taking away with it, anyway, when you think about where these incidents are happening anyway. But nothing's new in terms of these phenomena being associated with high technology. That's the same.
Yeah, and of course that is one of the most disturbing aspects of this is the nuclear component, especially with the missile silo encounters that, as you say, have been going on for decades, on and off again, and just the ones we know about, and now, yes, these nuclear powered aircraft carriers in some cases, and but so it's I'm really curious to see what's going to come out of this, but as John Greenwald of the Black Vault has said, people should be prepared for this to either be delayed, because that is just not uncommon, obviously, in the military, and that we may not get that much else out of it. But that, it's good to see this happening, but I don't know that I'm going to really hold my breath for anything new. But again, the rise in public and visibility on the subject is very, very interesting. And before, and I do this now with this multiple destroyers swarmed by mysterious drones off California over numerous nights. The Drive.com reporting, Forbes.com, mystery drones kept buzzing U.S. destroyers during exercises off California. Popular Mechanics says tic-tac shaped drones swarmed by Navy destroyers. No one knows where they came from. This is very interesting. Again, this escalation in the reportage on this producer and filmmaker Dave Beatty on Twitter saying regarding the 2019 USS Kidd UAP, they were hovering. Navy vet said his friend said he could see them with the naked eye and they were almost eye level with the bridge hovering. They were the same tic-tac shaped objects. This is the same area the Nimitz encounters took place. Again, this weird kind of focusing on, I swear to God, the tic tac. If I hear that phrase another time, is just strange to me because obviously we've with the UFO sightings, every type of shape you can imagine has been reported. There doesn't seem to be. There definitely seem to be kind of classes of, there were masses of triangle sightings, masses of quote unquote flying saucer sightings, but there's, box UFO, flying refrigerator type sightings. Actually, that's one of the phrases used in that Hunt for the Skinwalker movie. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, it should surprise us. What did I say? Rand, Ratcliffe, or Rubio, and Reed. Reed, of course, being the senator who helped get the funding for the ATIP OSAP programs. And Ratcliffe being the former director of intelligence that we were just quoting as having been interviewed by the Drive, or rather, TMZ. Meanwhile, we have, and this is really a quick clip, but Rand Paul ranting about earmarks in these COVID relief bills and whatnot.
And so I'm troubled that this is something you voice support for. There's $22 million put in a secret DoD program to investigate UFO sightings. This was one of Senator Reed's passions. I don't think we have to go further into the discussion of whether or not that's a good use of taxpayer money. 50,000.
Well, maybe we should, because it's not that much money in the grand scheme of things. That was from what 2012 excuse me, is it 2007 to 2012, $20 million. That's not that much money for that period of time. So.
Well, especially if you take Senator Reed and Elizondo and the other folks that are saying, at face value, let's not call this extraterrestrial, but let's call this a foreign military's high advancement in technology. Of course, we should be trying to understand. And that's, advanced aerial threat phenomena. That's what ATIP is about. So I don't know where, Rand is coming from in how he's sort of separating this notion of what the root funding mechanism is, which is potentially identifying advanced technologies from our competitors or whatever you want to call them in Russia and China and France, et cetera. But if that's the case, if that's what we're looking at is a breakthrough in technology, as Senator Reed has pointed out, the statements by Rand seem nearly not only dismissive, but irresponsible. And I think that's what that's what's pushing the ball forward on the ATIP thing. Not that we'll get any information on it, but it is somewhat reassuring if you take that perspective on it, that people are taking it seriously. And, look, secret technology going down that road and all like that, but if really and truly, if we have objects that can move the way that these things are reportedly moved, we are certainly behind the ball. I would like to think they're ours and it's just black budget stuff that we're testing on our own pilots, to see what the state of the possible is with radar systems, passive radar, all like that, and EO opticals, et cetera. We're testing it against ourselves. However, if that's not the case, it'd sure be good to know who the hell the stuff it is,
Yeah. And I get the rationalization that 80 to 90% of UFOs are in fact IFOs. If you have enough information, you can identify them as being misidentified mundane or maybe extraordinary, but not technological necessarily, maybe some kind of unknown natural phenomena. But time and time again, I always assert, you can actually learn a lot by not just observing anomalous natural phenomena, but whatever the heck these things are, we can learn a lot from them. And even if they aren't a threat-based technology from elsewhere or some other civilization that we're cohabitating this planet with, we can learn a lot by trying to reverse engineer that phenomena, that technology. And I think that's really where this value lies. And I totally agree. Iran is wrong in equating $20 million to investigate these things, especially again from the perspective of them being a potential threat, compared to the other things he was listing in that, which I didn't show, but like the previous slide was
Bridge to Nowhere,
or the a giant indoor rainforest, or some curio museums and so forth. So yeah.
But Miles, let's circle back to the way you started tonight's show, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Actually, Avi Loeb, the Israeli astrophysicist, what he's doing, he's on like a one-man mission, lately. If you guys go out there and look up the interviews he's done, he is actually laying out the science, astrophysical science, saying that, okay, so let me back up. So we look at the Tic Tac, Nimitz, Rand Paul, Harry Reid, all that sort of stuff from the ground up. We're thinking it's technology, but let's go at it from the other angle. Let's look at space looking down on Earth. Avi Loeb, other astrophysicists have now taken measurements. We've counted planets that are Earth-like, etc. But it turns out what we used to think of as the Earth as being in a this quote Goldilocks sort of relationship to our sun and other planets, our cyclical nature of our path across the cosmos, whatever you want to call it, just to keep it simple. But anyway, it's not unique at all. In fact, it's super standard. Like Earth, its distance from the sun, its mass, the amount of hydrogen, the atmosphere, everything is super abundant across, at least what we can call the observable universe. So I don't want people to lose sight of the fact that when we say, quote, extraterrestrial, you got to take a hard look at the new science. And that I can tell you what, man, Earth is not unique in any sense. The Goldilocks statement, throw it out the window. And that's what Avi is doing. We are super generic, literally. Cosmologically speaking, of course, Miles. Sorry to burst everybody's bubble. You're not unique.
What?
I know. Yeah. Especially you. Anyway.
All right. Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Victor, our volunteer, and thank you all for tuning in, and everybody who's listening to the after show, to the podcast, the vodcast archive of this. And we will be back next week for a brand new show, and look forward to seeing and hearing from you all. You can go to anomalyarchives.org, and you can email us at contact@anomalyarchives.org, and we'll be in touch. Peace.
Thanks, everybody.